I'm Lucy Price. I just turned 35, and I learned something brutal about birthdays in my family. They're not celebrations, they're scoreboards. You can walk in with a smile, a decent life, and a calm voice, and they'll still scan you like a receipt looking for proof you didn't measure up. That night I told myself I wouldn't give them a reaction, because in our house, the person who flinches becomes the entertainment. The restaurant was warm and crowded, the kind of place where everyone talks over each other like it's affection, and I was trying to enjoy the simple fact that I showed up anyway. Then the gift came. Not tossed, not shoved, just placed in front of me like a tiny verdict. My sister watched me the way people watch a door they're sure will slam. I opened the envelope and felt the table lean in before the laughter even started. A $20 gift card. The kind you buy last minute at a checkout line. She tilted her head and said, with that sweet venom she saves for me, that losers only deserve something like this. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I just held it for a second like it was meaningful, because I wasn't going to hand her the satisfaction of seeing my face crack. My dad chuckled and added that she must have put so much thought into it, and the whole table went off like I'd been written into their favorite joke. In that moment, I understood something clearly. They weren't laughing at the gift card. They were laughing at the version of me they'd decided I was. So I smiled, thanked them, and slipped the card into my purse like it mattered. I even raised my glass because sometimes the calmest smile is the sharpest warning. Then I stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked out without a scene. I let them keep their laughter for one more night, because the next morning, when I walked into the boardroom they thought I would never step foot in, the room didn't laugh. And when my sister looked up and saw me there, her face dropped. If you want the full story and the exact moment their little joke turned into panic, like this video, subscribe, and comment 20 below, then stay with me because what happened next made that gift card the most expensive $20 she ever spent. I didn't cry in the car. That's what my family always expected from me. Some messy breakdown they could later retell like a funny story over brunch. Instead, I drove home with my hands steady on the wheel, the city lights sliding across the windshield like nothing had happened. I kept replaying the way the table leaned in, the way my dad laughed like it was harmless, the way my sister watched me like she'd won something, and I kept hearing my own voice in my head, calm and polite, saying thank you, like I was trained to accept less. By the time I pulled into my apartment lot, the humiliation had cooled into something cleaner and sharper. Not rage, resolve. My place wasn't impressive, and that was the point. I'd learned years ago that looking ordinary made people careless. I kicked off my shoes, set my purse down, and pulled the gift card out again. $20. A tiny plastic reminder of who they thought I was. I tossed it into a drawer and opened my laptop. The screen lit up with a single new message that made my chest go quiet. It was from Marcus Hale, the one person in my world who didn't confuse silence with weakness. Closing is complete. Control position confirmed. Press release is queued for 6 a.m. Board has been notified of an emergency meeting at 8. For a second, I just stared. Not because I didn't understand, but because I did. The deal hadn't happened overnight. It had been building for months, piece by piece, signature by signature, numbers checked and rechecked until there was no room left for anyone to twist it. Tonight was simply the moment the last lock clicked into place. I picked up my phone and called Marcus. He answered on the second ring, voice low and professional, like he was already standing in a glass hallway somewhere. "You saw it," he said. "I did," I told him. "Is everything clean?" "Cleaner than clean," he said. "General counsel is ready. Your name won't leak until morning, but once it does, it's going to move fast." I walked to the window and looked out at the street below, people heading home, laughing, living simple lives, not knowing a war was about to start in a boardroom. "Good," I said. Because I don't want time for anyone to spin this. Marcus paused like he knew what I meant. Your family, he said carefully. They'll try. They always try, I replied. Then I asked the question that mattered. Are we protected from delays? He exhaled once. They can posture. They can threaten. But they can't stop you from walking in that room. Unless you blink. I almost smiled at that. I won't blink, I said. After I hung up, I didn't celebrate. I didn't pour a drink. I did what I always do when something big is coming. I prepared. I laid out the clothes I wanted them to remember me in. Not flashy, not desperate, just precise. I printed the documents that mattered, the ones that couldn't be argued with, the ones with signatures and timestamps and language that didn't care about anyone's feelings. Then I sat at my kitchen table in the quiet, listening to the refrigerator hum, letting the truth settle into my bones. All those years they called me a failure because I didn't chase their version of success. All those times they offered me pity jobs and fake advice and little laughs meant to keep me small. Tomorrow they were going to learn something they never bothered to check. The person you mock the most is often the one who's been planning the longest. My phone buzzed again. One more message from Marcus. Security will be expecting you. Enter through the west lobby. No interruptions. I stared at the words until they felt real. Then I locked my phone and leaned back. Outside, the city kept moving like it always did. Inside, I finally let myself breathe. Because by this time tomorrow, my sister's favorite seat at the table wouldn't matter anymore, and the $20 joke she bought at a checkout line was about to cost her everything. Thought for a couple of seconds. People think revenge starts with anger, but mine started years earlier with a quiet lesson I learned in my parents' kitchen. I was 19, standing there with a printed resume in my hand and a folder full of internship recommendations, and my family was treating it like a joke before I even finished my sentence. I'd gotten an offer to interview at the same company my sister loved to name drop at every holiday, the one she talked about like it was a kingdom that belonged to her. I wasn't asking for a favor. I was asking for a chance. My sister looked me up and down like she was deciding whether I was worth the embarrassment. Then she smiled and said I wasn't a fit. Not because I wasn't smart, not because I wasn't qualified, but because I didn't shine the way she did. She told my parents I was too quiet, too awkward, too plain, the kind of person who would make the family look small. And my parents believed her because believing her was easier than admitting they'd been wrong about me. My dad didn't even look up from his phone when he said it. He told me to be realistic, to stop chasing things I hadn't earned, to find something safe. My mom made it worse by pretending it was kindness. She said I'd be happier doing something simple, something where nobody expected too much from me. That night, I sat on my bed and listened to them laugh in the living room while my sister took credit for being ambitious and driven, and something in me snapped into place. I stopped trying to be seen by them. I started building where they couldn't reach. I took the work nobody wanted, the late nights, the projects that looked boring on paper and paid in slow, steady progress. I learned how to read people the way my sister read rooms, but I read balance sheets, contracts, patterns, the little behaviors that told you who was bluffing and who was solid. I became a consultant because it gave me two things my family never understood: access and anonymity. I got to see how companies actually ran behind the glossy headlines, where the money leaked, where the leadership lied, where the numbers didn't match the story. I lived like I had nothing because it was useful. When people assume you're broke, they stop guarding their mouths. They stop double-checking. They stop imagining you could ever be a threat. And while my sister posted photos from rooftop bars and vacations and expensive dinners, I quietly moved my life forward one decision at a time. I saved. I invested. I waited. I built Juniper Ridge Partners in a way that left no fingerprints my family would recognize. The funny part is, they helped me without meaning to. Every time they called me a failure, it pushed me to get sharper. Every time they offered me a pity job or a sarcastic smile, it reminded me that I didn't want their approval. I wanted control of my own story. By the time my sister started acting like her title made her untouchable, I already knew the truth about titles. They're only powerful until someone owns the room they're spoken in. And when I got that message from Marcus saying the closing was complete, it didn't feel like a sudden victory. It felt like the last page of a plan that started the day my family decided I wasn't worth taking seriously. The next morning, I didn't rush. I didn't need to. People who are desperate move fast, and I wasn't desperate anymore. I left my apartment early enough to beat the traffic, parked 2 blocks away, and walked the rest of the distance like I belonged there. Because I did. The building was all glass and polished stone, the kind of place my sister liked to point at whenever she wanted to remind me what real success looked like. I'd heard her talk about it at family dinners like it was sacred ground, like stepping inside required a certain bloodline or personality or volume. I stepped through the revolving doors and felt the air change, cool and expensive, the lobby quiet except for shoes on marble. A security guard checked a tablet, then looked up at me with a small nod. "Ms. Price, right this way." No confusion, no hesitation. My name was already in their system. I didn't smile at that. I just followed him to the elevator and watched the numbers climb. On the top floor, the doors opened to a corridor lined with framed awards and glossy photos of executives shaking hands, and I caught my reflection in the glass. Calm, collected. Nothing like the version of me my family laughed at. A woman in a tailored suit met me near the entrance to the conference wing, introduced herself as Diane Kessler, General Counsel, and spoke in the quiet, precise tone of someone who lived in paperwork. "The board is assembled," she said. "There's heightened emotion this morning, but the documents are in order. We'll proceed formally." She handed me a slim folder and pointed to a door at the end of the hall. "That's the room." I could hear muffled voices behind it, the kind of sharp, urgent talking that happens when people sense power moving and don't know where it will land. Diane opened the door and stepped aside. I walked in. The room fell silent the way rooms do when the wrong person enters. Long table, leather chairs, city skyline behind the glass wall, and a dozen faces turning toward me with the same question written on them: who is she, and why is she here? At the far end sat my sister, perfectly styled, chin lifted, hands folded like she owned every inch of the place. She looked up, and for half a second her expression didn't change because her brain refused to accept what her eyes were seeing. Then it hit her. The color drained from her face so fast it was almost theatrical. "Danielle?" she said, voice tight. Like my name tasted bitter. "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here." It wasn't a question, it was a command, the same one she'd been using on me since we were kids. I took the seat Diane indicated, right at the table, not in the back, not near the door. I set my folder down and looked around at the board members, letting the silence stretch until it belonged to me. Before anyone could speak, my sister forced a laugh that didn't fool anyone. "This must be some kind of misunderstanding," she said, glancing at the others as if begging them to agree. Then she turned back to me, eyes flashing. "Did you get lost? Are you here to apply for something?" A couple of people shifted uncomfortably. Someone cleared their throat. I kept my voice even. "I'm here because I was invited," I said. Diane placed a thicker stack of documents in front of each board member, the kind of stack that changes lives. The chair at the head of the table, a gray-haired man with tired eyes, scanned the first page and slowly looked up at me. "Ms. Price," he began. My sister leaned forward, fingers digging into the leather armrests, still trying to look in control. "This is my company," she snapped. "This is a family matter." She said it loudly, like volume could rewrite reality. Diane spoke before I had to, her tone calm, almost bored. "This is not a family matter," she said. "This is a corporate governance matter." There was a pause, the kind that feels like a door closing. I slid my folder forward, opened it with one smooth motion, and placed a single page in the center of the table. The signatures were clean. The timestamps were clear. The language was brutal in its simplicity. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I just said the sentence my sister had spent her whole life making sure I never got to say. "I'm the controlling stakeholder now." For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then my sister's eyes widened. Not with disbelief anymore, but with fear. She pushed her chair back hard enough that it scraped the floor. "No," she said, too fast. "No, that's not possible. This is a joke." But her voice cracked on the last word, because deep down she knew it wasn't. She grabbed her phone under the table, fingers shaking, and I didn't stop her. Let her call whoever she wanted. Let her run to the only place she'd ever felt safe. Because the moment she looked up again, her confidence had turned into something else. Something sharp and ugly. She pointed at me and said, "My dad's attorney is already on his way. And when he gets here, he's going to shut this down." The room went quiet again, but this time the silence didn't belong to me. It belonged to the threat. I leaned back slightly, folded my hands, and met her stare without blinking. "Good," I said softly. "Let him come." My sister kept her phone in her hand like it was a weapon, thumb hovering over the screen, eyes darting between me and the board as if she could intimidate the room back into her control. Nobody spoke for a few seconds, but I could feel the panic spreading under the polished surface, the way it always does when people realize the rules they relied on are about to change. Diane stayed composed. The board chair looked like he wanted a cigarette, and my sister wore that same expression she used at our family table whenever she decided I was about to be put in my place. Then the door opened again, and in walked a man in a dark suit carrying a briefcase with the confidence of someone who believed the room already belonged to him. He introduced himself without warmth, as counsel for my father. The way he said my father told everyone exactly what my sister meant by family matter. He didn't sit. He didn't ask permission. He placed his briefcase on the table and pulled out a set of documents as if this was the moment he'd rehearsed. "I am here to dispute the validity of any claim of control being asserted by Ms. Price," he said, and my sister's mouth twitched into a small, satisfied smile. She leaned back like she was about to enjoy the show. The attorney slid a packet across the table to the chair and to Diane, then added, "Pursuant to an executed consent and transfer agreement, the voting rights associated with these shares were assigned into a family trust for the benefit of the Price family. Any attempt to exercise control outside that structure constitutes a breach and will be challenged immediately." He spoke like the words themselves were handcuffs. My sister finally exhaled, as if she'd been holding her breath since I walked in. She looked straight at me, eyes gleaming, and said softly, "See, now sit down before you embarrass yourself." The board chair flipped through the packet, brows knitting together. One of the directors asked a careful question about timing. Another asked about the signature. The attorney didn't hesitate. He tapped the page with a practiced finger and said, "Signed and notarized. Dated. Enforceable. Your counsel will advise you accordingly." My sister watched my face, waiting for the moment I would finally crack, waiting for me to beg or lash out or admit I didn't belong, and I almost felt sorry for her, because she truly believed paper could erase what I had already secured. I reached for the packet, not snatching it, just taking it with the same calm you'd use to pick up a menu. I turned one page, then another, and there it was, a neat signature line with my name printed under it, a crisp mark that tried very hard to look like mine. I looked at my sister, then at the attorney, and I said, "This is the part where you expect me to panic, right?" My sister's smile faltered for half a second. The attorney didn't blink. "Ms. Price," he said, "I would strongly advise you to refrain from interfering with company governance while this matter is pending." I set the packet down and asked, "Pending under which entity?" He paused like he hadn't expected a question that specific. "The family trust," he replied. "And which shareholder entity allegedly signed this consent?" I asked, keeping my voice level. He glanced at the document as if reading it for the first time. "Juniper Ridge Partners," he said. My sister nodded quickly, like that name alone should end the conversation. I leaned back slightly and let the silence stretch long enough for everyone to feel it. Then I said, "Juniper Ridge Partners does not exist anymore." My sister's eyes narrowed. "Don't play dumb," she snapped. "You think you can just say that and make it true." Diane didn't interrupt. She watched me with the calm curiosity of someone waiting for a fact to land. The attorney's jaw tightened. "What are you implying?" he demanded. I turned toward Diane and the board chair. "3 days ago," I said, "Juniper Ridge Partners was legally restructured. Assets, control mechanisms, and voting rights were transferred to a new vehicle. Proper filings were made. Timestamps are recorded. If you want them, they're in your counsel's inbox already." I looked back at the attorney. "So, if your packet is claiming a transfer of voting rights from an entity that no longer holds those rights, then your packet is either useless or fraudulent." My sister pushed her chair forward, anger flashing across her face. "That's not how it works," she said too loudly. "You can't just move things around to dodge the family." The board chair raised a hand, not at her, but at the air, signaling for order. Diane opened her laptop with one smooth motion, clicked once, and slid her screen slightly so the chair could see. The attorney's confidence finally shifted just a fraction. He stepped closer, eyes scanning, and I watched the moment he realized he was standing on a trap door. Diane spoke, voice calm, clinical. "We received a notice of restructuring and transfer. It appears valid." The attorney's face hardened. "Even if that is true," he said, "we will seek an injunction. We will freeze this. We will bury you in litigation." My sister's smile came back, meaner this time, like she was savoring the idea of me drowning. "You hear that?" she said. "You're not taking anything." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smirk. I just looked at her and said, "You can try to freeze me, but you can't freeze what you can't touch." The board members shifted again, a ripple of unease. The attorney demanded copies. Diane offered to circulate them. My sister's fingers dug into the table edge, knuckles whitening, because she finally understood this wasn't a dinner table where she could win by being louder. This was a room where facts mattered more than family. And the next fact I was about to introduce was the one she never saw coming. The attorney started to speak again, but Diane lifted a hand, polite and firm, the way you stop someone from walking into traffic. "We're going to pause legal posturing for a moment," she said, "because the board has an immediate operational issue to address." She turned toward the CFO, Noah Whitman, who had been sitting quietly with a tablet in front of him, the kind of quiet that usually means someone knows more than they're saying. Noah cleared his throat and looked around the table. "Before today's meeting," he said, "we initiated an internal review due to irregularities flagged in Q4 reporting." My sister's head snapped toward him. "Irregularities," she repeated sharp. "This is not the time." Noah didn't flinch. "It is exactly the time," he said, "because those irregularities involve executive approvals and expense authorizations." My sister looked at the board chair like she expected him to shut it down. Instead, he nodded once, grimly. "Proceed." The room shifted, a collective lean forward, as if everyone had been waiting for permission to stop pretending. Noah tapped his tablet and sent a file to the screens at the far end of the room. A chart appeared, then a list, then screenshots of transactions. I didn't need to look at the details to know what it was. I had asked for this audit weeks ago, quietly, through the right channels, before my name ever touched the building. My sister's mouth tightened as she scanned the screen. She tried to laugh, but it came out thin. "This is ridiculous," she said. "Those are standard expenses: client development, travel, conferences." Noah swiped to the next page and the room got colder. Private jet upgrades? Luxury resort stays booked under project codes that didn't exist. Company cards used for personal shopping sprees labeled as vendor payments. A pattern, not a mistake. One of the directors leaned closer to read a line item, then sat back like he'd touched something dirty. My sister's eyes flicked to me, and for the first time that morning, her confidence started to crack in a way she couldn't patch with sarcasm. "This is a setup," she hissed. "Danielle is behind this." I didn't deny it. I didn't confirm it either. I just watched her scramble, because scrambling is what people do when the spotlight finally hits the truth. Noah continued, voice steady. "These expenditures were approved through your executive authorization," he said, looking directly at my sister. "And there are additional concerns regarding vendor relationships and potential kickbacks." The attorney shifted uncomfortably, suddenly less interested in his packet of forged papers and more interested in the word kickbacks. The board chair's face went hard. "Diane," he said quietly. Diane didn't hesitate. "We have sufficient cause to initiate termination for cause," she said, "and to refer certain findings for external review if the board directs." My sister's breathing changed. She looked around the room, searching for someone who would rescue her the way my family always had. She found nothing but closed faces. She turned to the attorney, almost pleading. "Tell them they can't do this." He hesitated, then said carefully, "This would be an internal governance decision, separate from the ownership dispute." My sister's eyes widened like she'd been slapped. In that moment, she realized the legal threat she'd counted on couldn't protect her from consequences inside this room. I finally spoke. Not loud, not emotional, just final. "The first decision I'm making as controlling stakeholder is to protect this company from anyone who treats it like a personal ATM," I said. I looked at the board chair. "I'm requesting a vote." The chair nodded once and called it. Hands went up around the table one after another, faster than my sister could process, because people like stability more than they like loyalty to a sinking ship. The motion passed. Diane slid a single sheet toward my sister. "Termination for cause. Effective immediately," she said. "Access revoked. Devices surrendered." My sister stared at the page as if it was written in another language. Then she snapped her head toward me, fury and disbelief mixing into something almost desperate. "You can't do this to me," she said. "I'm family." I almost laughed at how familiar that word sounded in her mouth, like a tool she only remembered when she needed it. "You weren't family last night," I said quietly. "You were an audience." She stood up so fast her chair lurched backward. "This is my company!" she screamed, and for the first time her voice didn't command the room. It echoed off glass like a tantrum. She grabbed her phone, stabbing at the screen, and I knew exactly who she was calling because she always ran to him when she couldn't win alone. My father answered on speaker, his voice irritated, like she was interrupting something important. "What is it now?" he demanded. She spoke fast, panicked. "Dad, they're trying to fire me. Danielle is here. She's claiming control. She's lying. They're setting me up." I watched the board members glance at each other, then at Diane, then back to the screens with the audit results. My father's tone shifted when he heard the word audit. "What do you mean? Irregularities," he snapped. "It's nothing," my sister insisted too quickly. "Just petty accusations. They're trying to steal the company from our family." Diane leaned forward and spoke into the open air, calm and precise. "Mr. Price," she said, "the board has reviewed documented misuse of corporate funds tied to your daughter's authorization. We are prepared to proceed with termination for cause and preserve records for external review. There was a pause long enough to swallow my sister whole. Then my father's voice came back colder, quieter. "Sloan," he said, "what did you do?" My sister's eyes darted and her mouth opened, but no words came out that could save her. "Dad," she whispered, "help me." Another pause, and I could hear something ugly in it. Not love, not concern, just calculation. "I'm not going down for you," my father said finally. "Handle your own mess." The line went dead. My sister stared at her phone like it had betrayed her, because in her world it had. Her shoulders shook, not with tears yet, but with shock. Two security officers appeared at the door, led by Rafael Torres, their head of security, and he spoke with professional neutrality. "Ms. Price," he said, "please come with us." My sister backed up a step, scanning the room again, waiting for the laugh track, waiting for someone to call this a prank. Nobody did. She tried one last time, pointing at me with a trembling finger. "This isn't over," she spat. "You think you won?" I met her eyes and kept my voice low. "I don't think I won," I said. "I know you lost." Raphael held the door, and my sister walked out with her head high for exactly 3 steps before her posture collapsed under the weight of everyone watching. The door closed behind her, and the room finally exhaled. The board chair looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "Ms. Price," he said, "we need to discuss next steps." I nodded once and opened my folder again. Because the truth is, firing my sister wasn't the end of the story. It was just the moment the building stopped belonging to her. By the time the meeting ended, the skyline outside the glass wall had shifted into a brighter shade of morning, and the room felt different, not warm, not friendly, just calmer, like a storm had passed and left the air clean. People gathered their papers quietly, avoiding each other's eyes the way adults do when they've witnessed something ugly and irreversible. Diane stayed behind with me, already outlining a plan in the same steady tone she'd used all morning: revoke credentials, secure devices, preserve records, appoint interim leadership, communicate to staff without feeding rumors. Noah offered to brief the audit team and lock down the financial systems. The board chair asked me what I wanted my first message to the company to be. I didn't answer with a victory speech. I told them the truth. "We focus on stability," I said. "We protect the people who actually do the work. And we make it clear that titles don't grant immunity." When I walked out into the hallway, employees were gathered in small clusters, whispering, watching. Some looked nervous, some looked curious, and a few looked relieved, like they'd been waiting for someone to finally say what they couldn't. I didn't stop to perform for them. I just nodded, kept moving, and let the new reality speak louder than any announcement. In the elevator, the silence hit me in a different way. Not the tense silence of being mocked, but the quiet after a long fight when you realize you're still standing. I thought about that gift card again, how small it had been, how loudly it had echoed across the table. $20 meant to shrink me. Instead, it became a receipt for every moment they'd tried to define me as less. I didn't feel happy in the cartoon way people imagine revenge feels. I felt clear, and that clarity was worth more than any apology I'd never get. Later that afternoon, I stopped by my apartment long enough to change into something more comfortable and drink a glass of water, because adrenaline makes you forget basic things like being human. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't open and a few missed calls from numbers I recognized but didn't answer. I knew what those calls were. They weren't love. They were damage control. When you take away someone's ability to humiliate you, they suddenly remember you exist. I let the phone ring out, then set it face down on the counter. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel pulled toward their approval or afraid of their disappointment. I felt like I had boundaries that actually held. And that's the part people don't talk about. The real win isn't watching someone fall. The real win is realizing they can't reach you anymore. Here's what I learned, and what I hope you take from this. Family can be a blessing, but it can also become a system that rewards cruelty and punishes quiet strength. If the people closest to you only value you when you fit their narrative, that isn't love, it's control. Don't confuse being calm with being weak, and don't let anyone measure your worth by appearances, job titles, or how loudly you talk in a room. You can build a life privately, strategically, and honestly, and still be powerful. But when the time comes, use that power responsibly, not to destroy for fun, but to protect what's fair, to hold people accountable, and to make sure the next person in your position doesn't get laughed at the way you did. Now I want to ask you, was what I did justified, or did I go too far? If you were in my shoes, would you have cut them off completely, or given them one last chance to change? Tell me in the comments, and if you want an epilogue about what happened to my sister and my parents after the investigation started, let me know what kind of ending you want to hear. Our team at Revenge Argon works hard to create compelling, meaningful scripts, and every story you hear is purely fictional. We share these narratives to deliver positive lessons and educational takeaways that can inspire and help viewers reflect on real-life choices. Thank you for listening to the story all the way through. If you enjoyed it, please follow the channel. It really helps us stay motivated to create even more high-quality, exciting videos for you.